we on? Good. Welcome to the Better Than Not podcast. Sometimes we get it right, sometimes we don't. But when we at least do something, we know it's almost always better than not. Hi there, and welcome to Better Than Not, the podcast that aims to capture shifting perspectives and thought-provoking ideas in conversation, which is based loosely on my series A Changing Frame of Reference, which you can read on the Substack app, and I hope you will, as it might give you some insight into what this podcast is all about. I'm your host, Doug Gardam, and today I get to welcome back Kirk Sutherland. Kirk, how are you?
Good, Doug. How are you?
I'm doing great. This is first time on video, this one.
First time on video.
Kirk?
Yeah. It's
Kirk,
quite daunting.
yes,
Yeah.
to say the least.
Yeah.
Kirk
Yeah.
is recognized as an international artist. He's a lecturer, he's a father of two, and he's kind of a busy, creative guy a lot of the time. And unbeknownst to me, from when we talked the first time, Kirk and I kind of grew up on the opposite ends of a park that separated us. So when I discovered that he was in the art world and doing showings around the world with his work, and if you're on Facebook or other things, you'll be able to see some of his work. We're going to be talking about it today. You might know how amazed I was and very, I'll say, honored that he would come on and talk to us about what he does on Better Than Not. So in this one's kind of a continuation of the last one, as far as what we talked about. Kirk was very, I'll say, complimentary of his background. First of all, at the art department at Markham District High School. And he spoke very highly of the art school in Toronto that he went to as well, and many of his mentors. So what we did is kind of ran out of time the last time. This time I thought, well, maybe we'll talk a little bit more about his art, and we've got lots of other things to go through. Does that kind of cover it, Kirk?
It covers it completely, you know. No, it's an open road, Doug. You know.
It is, and who knows
Yeah.
what direction we're going to head down today.
Exactly.
But
It's all good.
I'm going to go back to a little bit of what we talked about the last time, because I'm always interested in what I'll call it. I won't say so much inspires, but when you recognized there was something that you could do that wasn't necessarily fit in with schooling and our social world and our friends and stuff, but it was something that was very connected with you. Do you remember the first time like that kind of happened in your life? Like, was it in your teens? Was it later?
There was a point, I know creatively, where I felt that there was something wrong, because I was basically classically trained by the time I was about 16 or 17. So at that point, I became very, very bored. I became bored because you realize that, yes, there is something to be said about technique and understanding the theory behind art, which today, even today, I was lecturing and I said, none of you are even making art here. I'm having you do something that's purely conceptual, purely theoretical, and it's nothing more than, if anything, you are drafting something, or you're rendering something, but it has nothing to do. You're not using your right brain. I wasn't using my right brain while I was performing these exercises. And I realized that, well, what's going on inside of me cannot be taught. It can't be taught. It can only be explored. Like, you can't teach someone honesty. You can't teach someone integrity. You can't teach someone creativity. You can't teach someone to explore.
Mm-hmm.
You can guide them in a direction, but exploration is really, it's a solitary act. When you're walking that trail, even if you're following someone, it's your own motivation. It's your own, you're accelerating on your own,
Yeah.
so to speak. So at which point I started, I don't know, it was hmm I was becoming highly influenced by a number of artists, and you have real limitations when you're in grade 10.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That like, that's
Yeah.
right there is kind of a neat thing. Like, do you remember who some of those individuals were that like you found influential or connected with?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I remember going to the school library. I remember going to the library in town,
Yeah, yeah.
and there was no internet. There was nothing
Nothing.
like that. Nothing at all. Uh, I remember being amazed by Camille Pissarro, who was an impressionist, probably not given the same amount of of uh, of elevated regard as, say, someone like Monet.
Right,
Um, Definitely. I mean, there's nothing to take away. I'm not going to take away from Monet. He's one of my heroes.
right.
But I was amazed by him. When I saw Frank Stella's work for the first time, it blew my mind. Uh, I remember seeing Paul Jensen. He was
Oh,
another artist who fell into the um, Jenkins. Sorry, Paul
oh,
Jenkins,
geez, yeah.
who fell into the abstract expressionist school, and that's where I wanted to go. I wanted to go someplace where I didn't have. Well, I could surrender control, because I think I was pinned down
Mm,
with learning and having to follow rules.
yes, yeah.
And within me, um, I'm I am a very rebellious person anyways,
Yes.
I suppose, because I don't fit in. I have a strong sense of originality, so I can't really be told what to do. So to me, it was nothing more than a mathematical equation or something. It didn't, I was becoming bored, and it didn't, um, it wasn't a good feeling, but it was good that I felt that way, to get
Yep.
out of that scenario, to figure and find out that I'm going to do this. And then you make a lot of really, really horrific paintings to get to understanding. And you play around with material to the point where you now have a grip on it. You have a grip on how to use certain things, and in the process, you learn a lot. So
So when you're so you said like grade 10, that's around 14, I'm gonna guess. And
I guess about
you
15-ish or so,
yeah, you're
yeah.
starting to recognize someone like Cero. Um, Not a lot of people are talking about that person when you're in grade 10.
Right.
Like, did that just kind of exacerbate the situation of kind of feeling like odd? Like, I'm cashing
Well,
out to Cero, and my friends are all kind of, I don't know, listening to pop music kind of thing. And like, was that something like did were you even aware that like this was something different, but kind of how would I say it? Kind of interesting for someone at that young age to have that kind of fascination with a classic artist like that.
there's a lot of links. So I even when I was younger than that, I was drawn to sounds and music that were unusual.
Mm,
And I remember being very young and getting in, like young, like we're talking 9 years old, and I was into the Doors. And you realize that the Doors, well, there's a link in all this. So you've got Camille Pissarro, you've got these artists, you've got these philosophers and whatnot that were coming through Romanticism, and you have Jim Morrison making this music, and he was completely influenced by William Blake, the great poet
Yes.
and painter.
Yes. Yeah.
So this was all gelling together, because I, call it what it is, synesthesia,
Yep.
because you could hear those paintings, and then you could see those songs. So and it was all linked together. And at the same time that all this is going on, there the post punk movement was going on as
Yes.
well. And
Yes.
if you listen to some of the sounds of some of those bands, they take all of their, not all their, but they take a lot of their influence from the Velvet Underground and
Yep.
bands like that,
Yep.
linked to Andy Warhol. There's all
Yep.
these beautiful underground rivers
Yes.
moving around, right? That I didn't realize at the time. Why did I like it? I didn't actually stop to even analyze it. I just followed it because it was
You were
the
interested.
right thing to do, and it was exciting.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's interesting that you mention William Blake, because it's like I feel almost like William Blake has become interesting to me from writing and its art, and how he depicts a lot of, shall we say, um, I'll call them biblical events in his art,
Mm-hmm.
and brings a visual to something that previously we kind of only saw written down. And this is kind of coming to your point about connection, right? So we've got
Right.
Andy Warhol with the Velvet Underground connected to Jim Morrison, like the Doors. That music was very even haunting at the time. Like it is
Mm-hmm.
still haunting when you hear it. And in many ways, it could almost be current. Like, do you know what I mean by like
It hasn't. Yeah, it's so original.
it?
It hasn't dated. Um,
It's so odd to me how some songs just seem to have that kind of staying power. That, and when I think of the Doors, that's one of the bands that like he they were just they were just something out of nowhere, so to speak.
well, they never did fit in because you had peace, love, and groovativity, and the Doors wouldn't have anything to do with it. He was all about leather, and a lot of his works were um, they had nothing to do with peace. They were questioning all kinds of things, and there was a lot of uh, deconstructivist
Mhm.
con- and almost, pointing out at the darker side of things, you
Oh,
know,
really? No, like the
and
lyrics.
feeling it and everything else, but done so beautifully, and poetically, and where four people can merge. Uh, I, I see the band as four equals. Actually, if you really listen,
Interesting.
uh, Jim had a major part, obviously frontman, but let's put it into the studio. It's quite amazing. So,
It's interesting when you
um,
say that, because I think there's a lot of bands that are like that, where they're the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, because they none of them have really been able to go on and, shall we say, get the attention that the four of them got as a band, and what they put
mhm,
together
yeah,
musically. I find it
yeah,
very, very intriguing. And there's a lot of bands that seem to do that. Like, oh, I can do this on my own, and nobody even knows who they are. But when they come together, there's a magic almost that seems to happen that feed off one another. So I think what you said about the Doors is very interesting, because most of the time there's always the Jim Morrison part that's recognized, but
right,
the other
right. And it's
three played some amazing connections for that music.
exactly, and it's funny because now my art history mind's playing around with all kinds of stuff. When you do have Warhol, who was a contemporary at the time of the Doors, the Velvet Underground with Lou Reed playing in New York, also playing very dark underground music.
Yes.
Um, Andy Warhol, I like to define him as a neo Dadaist. And the Dada movement was the movement, you could say, that was the precursor to surrealism. And when you look at Blake,
Oh,
Blake was actually a surrealist 100 years before surrealism actually came to being.
right, right.
Like surrealism was tied in with Marxism and they were enthralled with Freud. Freud had no time. He was a classical thinker. He had no time for the surrealists, but the surrealists loved Freud. This is long before those people were even born.
Yes.
That Blake was
Start.
was creating these very very surreal paintings that made perfect sense to him, I guess, or maybe they didn't. And they were beautiful and confusing and wonderful and gutsy
Yes. Yes.
and and this. I love. And this is what I've always tried to do, if I can, and I try to do. It's got to happen, serendipitously, but there's some kind of awkward perfection.
Mhm.
There's something awkward about the work,
Right, right.
you know. There's something awkward about sometimes with the Doors because they didn't go into the studio and say, "Hey, let's make a hit song." No, they just poured out their souls. I don't come downstairs into my studio and say, "I'm going to make a hit, painting." No, I'm just thirsty and hungry for purple and I got to get it out. And if it lands up on the wall someplace in Europe, that's just the serendipity of it. It
Yes.
had nothing to do with anybody else. And I believe the Doors and everyone we've been talking about, they didn't cater to anybody,
No,
no.
and I think that's what makes it kind of interesting. It's like I heard someone say at one point in time that once they felt their work was done, it was now the world's. It was no longer theirs. Like they would get credit for creating it, but it wasn't
Yeah.
theirs anymore. It was there for the world to kind of have, which is in a way what you're describing there, right? It's like this wasn't done for this particular purpose. It's what came out of whatever was going on at the time with that particular artist. So you're
Mm.
continually trying to be in or find that mode.
Well, yeah. And I think what you said is actually, it's bang on. There wouldn't have been an opening that I've been at, one of my own openings, where you're interviewed by people and people are talking to you, and in a lot of ways, you just want the paintings to just, it's not about me. Like I want to go home, really. And these can stay here for 30 days because this is the reason for this,
Yes, yes.
right? In the end, this is turning on the radio when it's there. This is there's 40 of these around. They're on walls, they're beautifully curated. The curated. Um, that's what should speak right now.
No, that,
I really have nothing to say. You
and
know.
and one of the things that I find really interesting with the social media world, because you post under Kirk Sutherland that I see on Facebook most of the time, I
Yeah.
think. It's funny because that's the one I spend the least time on, but for some reason or other, the algorithm has your picture, your things coming up on my feed all the time. And you're correct. The way that they're mounted, and I don't mean frames here, I mean just how they're put into an environment, whether that's you or whether that's people doing it, they often fit beautifully. Like it's as if they were done for that purpose. And I know they weren't, but it's like, and that's why I talked to you because there's two things here that I wanted to touch on. One of them is, and I talked to people about your art in the fact of the color you seem to get. Like it seems beyond the colors that exist. The second thing is you mentioned synesthesia. And so um, you had described this in our last interview, which I'd never actually heard of before. So maybe for those that are listening and haven't heard the last episode, can you describe that a little bit? Because it does fit with color.
Yeah. Well, synesthesia is the blending of the senses. So, or it's one sense intersecting with another. So if I guess conventionally, neurotypical people, When they see something, they won't hear it, or if they see something, they won't taste it. So I do.
Mm,
I taste color,
yes.
or when I hear sounds. Because funny enough, when I listen to music, I actually break it all down into sounds. And it's like when I see realistic paintings, I just break them down into the elements all the time. And I just break everything down. And when I hear those sounds, I can visualize them, right? So that's
Ah,
blue. That's, um, that's green. Those are lines, whatever. Uh, some reason I got this thing with taste because when I drink wine, I have visualization. And when I see wine, I see green, I see other colors in the wine because I break down not only the wine itself, I break down color anyways. I pixelize it. So if a car went by and it's blue, I'll say it's not blue. No, it's got 13% this, I'll start breaking it down. Right. But yeah, I'm a real. You don't want to drink wine with me because I remember a tasting note from 30 years ago. I'm not kidding you.
really?
I remember, I remember a tasting note from 30 years ago. I remember the color, I remember the experience, and I remember the lines. I remember the textures. I remember all this stuff, just like it was a mosaic etched into my senses.
Wow.
Um, but I mean, I'm not. It's not obsessive. It just if I think about it, or if that memory comes up, it can. Then it's not a bad thing. People they always say, "Well, man, you must be overwhelmed or whatever." You only know what you know.
Yeah, yeah. No, don't.
Yeah. I mean, does it's just what it is.
Well,
Yeah.
don't you find that that is part of, I'll call it, your creative art as well, that it connects that up, or maybe connects the wrong word. But is it useful in that creating part that you go through sometimes?
I guess it is. Yeah, the way I see things. I mean, I'm I've got you look at some of the color masters,
Mm,
you know, Joseph Albers. I don't know if he had synesthesia. I don't think he did. Um, Hans Hoffman, he might have. I'm not too sure. I studied with Francois Tepeau at OCAD, and he was, a very well known uh, 20th century master of color, and he never brought up anything like that.
interesting,
Uh,
interesting.
uh, yeah, although he was a professor and one of the kindest people I ever met, but you couldn't get close to him. Like you couldn't get you'd spend 2 years under his wing, but it's nothing I ever knew personally about him.
No, okay.
Yeah, he
But
was
he influenced
France,
your
wore an
work a lot.
ascot, was a classy guy, a wonderful human being, but not like you could, he wouldn't embellish anything. It was straight down to, color theory and as I said, he was kind and generous and wonderful and whatever else. But if he did have it, I wouldn't even know it.
Right.
So I don't think being a colorist necessarily can link you to having synesthesia, but if I can, if in my mind, and it's funny, I say taste color, but it isn't the way like you would go and grab food.
Right, right,
It's
right.
different.
Yes.
It's from a different place. It's really hard to
It
describe,
almost like
but
it
it's
it's almost it almost defies description in a way. Like that's where I start to say you start to find the limitation of language, right? Because we want to describe everything with words, but there is clearly a limitation to how our emotions, how our brain, how our consciousness works, that we just don't have language for. Like it's just it you we do our best, but it's still, I think, a very difficult thing to do. Would you call him a major influence on your color in your work?
Yes, yes, because well, just what he taught me
Okay.
um, right away, immediately um, meeting him. He didn't get into, he didn't do what other professors or color masters seem to do, bring out flashcards and show you stuff or whatever. No, no, no. We use this. You can still get it. It's a watercolor paint called gouache, designer's gouache. It's like a watercolor, only it's opaque. It's got a chalk in it, so it's everything. It tends to dry flat. Sort of a strange thing to paint with, but he had us only working with that, and right away,
Oh,
he had us roll up our sleeves, and he had us do things that were supposed to be taboo, mixing things, doing things, confronting things. Um, he would use language like shimmer. I want you to. I want you to. Really, what he was trying to teach, what I learned from him, is the vibration of color. He called it shimmering. It's shimmering,
okay.
and there wasn't any 3 hour session that I didn't walk out, and I was, I don't know, I I grew more in 3 hours, and then I grew more again the following week, and I had 2 years with him, and then he retired.
Oh, wow.
So
To me,
at 65, and went back to Paris. Yeah.
when you describe that, it's one of those things that I think when you find someone who it's like when the student's ready, the teacher appears, it seems. And you were obviously ready for that to connect, but you also connected in a very, call it, deep or meaningful way. He probably loved you as a student, just from the point of view of how you absorb stuff too. Because it's kind of it's
Mm,
almost it's an indescribable connection, but yet it works. And now your work has been influenced by what you were exposed to through him.
exactly. And so those are the people that I was gravitating towards, those who had a sensibility for color. Um, Paul Sloggett was another one who to this day he's a strong colorist. He um, was someone who was very influential to me, um, and pushed me. Different personality. He was more of a hockey coach. He didn't fool around, and I'm glad he didn't. And but on the same token, he was exceedingly generous and a really good human being, and an incredible artist and a great painter. And I learned a lot about color with him, about just about learned a lot about composition, learned a lot about experimentation, learned a lot of art history.
Oh, wow.
He was a big one. Yet he was another one. This is not a quote from him, but you got to like dive in.
Yeah.
You got to dive in. You may end up drowning, but you got that's what you got to you've got to do that.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
I think he also had he also pointed out you have to feel,
Mm.
and I was feeling, but it's like, okay, now recognize that feeling.
Ah,
That's
okay.
kind of the way he was. Uh, very, very kind, and he cared a lot too. So yeah.
Wow. Well, it's interesting how you describe this because I was talking to you before we went on. You've recently put out a new piece. You think you called it Sway,
Sway. Yeah.
and it jumped out at me right away. And I was going to say your colors usually do, but there was something about this that there was almost like pieces within pieces, in parts of it. And the reason why I kind of say that is that I love how you described you got to feel and then you recognize that feeling. It's like how I describe some people in that they're very good at articulating their emotions. And I think as a human being, that is in many ways a real challenge because
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
oftentimes, depending on what emotional state you're in, words don't come to you. So so you can't, you're like, for example, you're just mad, and like you can try and quantify it or put it into language, but it just gets worse because it's not really how you're feeling at all. And some people have a real ability, I call it a gift, to be able to articulate how you're feeling, and it really helps to open up their communication. So what you're describing to me, I think it was Paul you said was the second person that was the colorist, and
Right. Pulse log it. Yeah.
how he, part of what I think is a real benefit here is, like he said, it was like a hockey coach, just dive in. And there's
Mm-hmm.
something about that action that goes on. Like I think I can't tell you how many, I'll call it authors, that kind of say to write, you have to pick up the pen and write. Like you
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
like, I remember one of the first that I remember hearing years ago was like, one of the first things you got to remember about writing is you got to write the first word. And I said, well, I think that's the second. The first is you got to remember to write the first word. Writing the
Mm-hmm.
first
Mm-hmm.
word's one thing, but you've got to remember to write it. So when you talk about art and diving in, it's kind of like the same thing. And I think you said earlier on, you go through a lot of crap because that's how it starts off, right? Like you've got to work your way through whatever that stuff is inside you to get to the point where now you're comfortable with what's coming out. Is that a fair way of describing it? And it can take
Yeah.
years.
I don't even know if I'm even comfortable. See, I'm actually in a better position when I'm uncomfortable, because when I'm uncomfortable, I realize that I'm not being predictable.
Yes.
And if I'm not being predictable, then I'm not resting on my creative laurels.
Yeah.
Like, oh, great, you made another one that's just like, the other 500. If there isn't any progression, if you're not pushing the foundations
Oh, good.
and
Yeah.
maybe your own conventional thinking, then uh, then basically you're stagnant. And if you're stagnant, there's no movement.
Yes.
And in spirituality and natural medicine, when you're stagnant, well,
Yep.
usually you find yourself in a position of pain.
Yeah.
So um, but movement can be painful too. It's just a different kind of pain.
Yeah.
It's actually oddly, it's for me, I wouldn't say it's pain. It's a feeling of being unsettled when I feel slightly like I want to fall back to something, change that, or
Ah.
go back to the familiar, and I hesitate and I stop and I pull back and I resist.
Yep.
That's when it's like, oh, gee. But that's good. It's good. That's when I know I'm in a good spot.
Oh,
When I
cool.
go to bed and I'm going, you know what? I just want to get down there. No, leave it, because the whole point of it is you aren't. It's not about it's not like you're manufacturing the same thing over and over again. The same piece of furniture
Yes.
that's coming out of the factory. Everything is original and everything comes from that place, and leave it, because in the end, pictorially and within the composition, that tension creates visual tension, and there's something going on in the picture plane that a week or two later, a year later, you're thankful you did it,
Yes.
because now you're in a different spot. If you didn't move, if you stayed stagnant, you wouldn't be in that place. You wouldn't be. You'd still be in that small house, someplace in
Yep.
that small town, but you've wanted to move, and because you've made that movement, maybe you've circled the earth 3 times.
That that is
So
that is what you've just said is kind of like a very neat, articulate way of describing the process. It's like I was saying to a comic friend of mine, because he was saying, like, in the comic world, you sometimes you gotta get out of your way, and you gotta go out and do stuff, like big stuff, right? And it's risky. And I said it's like you have to become if you're not uncomfortable, you're not doing this thing called life right.
Hmm.
If and what you've just said is that in many ways. And it's not really what we're kind of told by society. It's almost opposite to it. Like it's like when you're happy and comfortable, then you've made it. And that's when you're that's not right, I don't think. That's not I mean,
Well,
we seem to want to strive there, but what you've just described is becoming almost in a way comfortable with the discomfort so you can move on.
right. And then you realize in life, Doug, you're you're comfortable, you're content, but that's the illusion you create because you don't know what the people around you are truly thinking because
Yeah.
we live in a dimension where it's an honor system. We're just either going to accept someone's word or we're going to reject it. We tend to want to accept it, or else we'd be cynical if we didn't. But we truly don't know what's on the other side.
No, no.
So, in a sense, there's this ambiguity all the time. And I guess if energetic frequencies are close enough, I guess there's a synergy there. Or is that synergy just something that is illusionary because the whole thing seems to be that way? And the same thing goes that um, being completely content is good. Content is fine, but there always has to be something that'll drive you.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah, yeah. No,
something that will motivate you, and sometimes things that seem to be traumatic or um, driven from anxiety and whatnot. If you look back, you realize that was a necessary condition. I'm glad that happened. You
yeah.
know,
Oh,
yeah, I went through a few weeks of hell, but hey, you know what? Look at what it did. It propelled me to here, but I couldn't get propelled to here unless there was something that was going to do it.
right, right.
You know?
Yep. And it's in a way, Kirk, we're not I don't think we're really taught that. I think in some special cases people might not know the good fortune of doing that, but like you described Paul as this hockey coach, right? And a hockey coach, if you go to that kind of example, drives you to go beyond what you really believe you can do. And to me, in the art world, and I'll speak of whether music, whether it's the visual art, whether it's writing, all of those, when you stop challenging yourself with that, you become stagnant and no longer content with what you're not content, but it doesn't work anymore. And somehow, Kirk, that has come together in your work to me because what you post, and one of these days I'm going to get to see an original, but what you post to me, there's something that opens up in your heart when you look at it. And in talking with you, it just further opens up. Like this is what's going on here. So
Yeah.
you haven't talked about sway at all here, but yet now I'm thinking about that when I saw it was yesterday or on the weekend, and I'm thinking it's it's now opened up. What would it be like to really see it on a wall in front of me in reality? Like that's what I think would
Mm.
be like how interesting that would be. So it has an effect. And I've kind of put down that effect or impact. A lot of it comes from how you get to your color. Because
Well.
I can only think that this isn't all kind of happy. There's a lot of, I'll say, maybe misery and pain, suffering that's pulling these brilliant yellows. I'm calling them yellows, but um, and like almost vivid, like orange or reds and things like that, that just reach out and almost grab you. And that's on
Mhm.
a computer screen. What do they do when you see the actual work in front of you?
I think the technology of computers it can drive me crazy because it nothing. Yeah, I always look at it like my poor daughter. She's about the only one. She comes into she's the only one allowed in my studio, and she's been around my art all her life. So it's no big deal. And it's like, dear, is it, no, Dad, it's not saturated. It looks just like the other, no, yeah. I look at the electronic images. I'm like, that's slightly off. That's this and that. You sure, I've even asked colleagues. So yeah, I'm never happy with what I really post.
Okay.
It's more aggravating than anything because I can't get it to that point. There's a certain pitch. There's a certain is it does it come across a little too satin or a little too gloss or a little too because really, to be honest with you, my paintings have just as much to do with material itself, the celebration of material. As Frank Stella said, he used to use a lot of house paint back in the late 50s. And he opened up a quart of paint and he'd look down at it and he'd say, if I can, that's perfect. That's perfect. If I can get as close as I can to that, then I've made a good painting. Right? You
Okay.
know, yeah. Or
Interesting.
Paul Sloggett, this is another one he'd go, if you have a millimeter, what was it? If you can get a millimeter of a Monet, then you've had a good day, type thing. Um,
Wow.
but yeah, materials, like it's the materials themselves. It's paintings about paint. There's no narrative. There's no narrative here. Sure, there's it's all metaphysical. It's feelings and unseen things and whatever else, but there's no narrative.
Yep.
I'm not talking about the conflict theory. I'm not this has nothing to do with the building of a great nation or about someone's views. No, nothing like that at all. It far surpasses that to a place where, like, can you imagine if we could ever get to a place where we didn't even need this anymore? We didn't even need this nonsense. We didn't even need to be this way, but we have to be this way because, as I said before, everyone has their own POV and everyone has their own, and it's beautiful that everyone has their own direction and they should have their own point of view. And I'm all about liberty and freedom, and I practice the universal law of free will. But with all that included, um, uh, this is a place that doesn't need the worldly issues that we deal
Oh,
with.
yes. Oh,
That's a newspaper, or
yes.
that's everywhere. This is another place.
Well, this to me, Kirk, in talking with you, it's always so refreshing because we get so caught up more than I think ever with our invention of the cell phone and with the availability of social media. The world gets caught up in like a lot of nonsense. I don't have another word for it. And why it's fun to have the chat with someone who's actually working outside of that, to create something. I find it like really fascinating. One of the things that I was going to bring up to you, because it's there's two things that kind of came up recently. One of them was I was told, and why this has never occurred to me before, but they said that over 50% of all life is under the surface of the ocean. And we didn't actually start to kind of explore that till like almost 100 years ago. That was
Mm-hmm.
the first point. The second point was what science has been telling us about, I'll call it dark energy and dark matter, depending on how you follow some of these things.
Right.
And that 5% of our existence is made up of visible matter. So the table that's in front of me or the camera that we've got playing this, that's visible matter. Dark energy and dark matter, both of which, again, are theoretical, make up 95% of this existence. So, to your point that you were saying before, it's kind of staggering to me that our physical science world is what we've probably learned the most about. But if we look at our existence, we're only looking at 5% of it. Like science back in the Darwinian times, they basically started to discount the the natural stuff. Like if your theory or what you're dealing with isn't natural, meaning that it's not metaphysical, we'll study it. But if it's metaphysical, you're out. We're not even going to look at it.
That's right.
And when
Yeah.
you start to look at this, because what you're doing fits into this world to me, like fits into this. You mentioned metaphysical already, but I'm kind of thinking of this unconscious, this disc, the unconscious, the world which is, call it dark or dark energy and matter. This 95% of, like, we go to sleep at night for eight, well, whatever it is, we sleep a third of our lives away.
Mm.
And when you go to science and medicine, they basically say we know how to turn it on and turn it off. That's it.
Yep.
Which when you think about, we're are in our advanced society today. The reason why I'm telling you, talking about this, is because I think what you're doing fits into this in a visual way that comes out. You mentioned Copernicus before, but it's like it's kind of how they're matching up, and it's really weird to me that we've done so little work on such massive part of our existence, to where, and partly is what your work is, trying to bring that out into a visual form.
Yeah. I and it's and as we talk about it, I mean, even then, there's a um, hmm, there's a veil of unknown, really.
Oh, I love the thing.
To be honest with you, because there's no, like, I don't, like, I'm not motivated by conventional worldly um,
Right,
um, ways,
right,
like, so, like, I'm going to do this because I'm going to be paid.
right,
you
right,
know
right, right, right.
I'm doing this because when you get paid, you can buy food and you can survive, and you
Yes,
can pay your bills, and you
yes,
can put gas in your vehicle. No, there's nothing logical about what I do.
right, right.
Not even close. No, there's nothing pragmatic. Sorry, yeah, no, there's nothing pragmatic about it at all. It's complete desire. It doesn't have a function. You can't open a can with it. It won't drive you to the airport. It's not a design.
And it's not linear.
So what's
It's
that?
not linear either.
It's not linear. No, not by any means. So it kind of probably in a lot of ways, Doug, falls into nature, because we talk of science and we talk of what we think we know. I
Yes.
like this. We think we know.
Yeah.
Do we really know how a tree really
Oh my
functions?
goodness.
You don't. All we know is that tree out there right now can survive when it's minus 45 degrees and be perfectly fine in the spring.
Yep.
And if you and I, we wouldn't last 10 seconds outside.
No.
So we're fragile beings that think we know everything. And I happen to believe that this is all energy and frequencies. And I feel strongly that it isn't what the more linear side tries to make it seem.
Right. Right.
It's not like that at all. So I guess when I'm painting, when I'm doing what I do, and I think that's why I'm inspired by people like Rothko, who, you know, really, it had everything to do. What he did had everything to do with feeling.
Uh-huh.
Not so much his feel. What was it again that he said that I'm going to butcher this one. That his paintings don't. His paintings are not about feeling. His paintings create feeling, basically, and and and
Yes.
and the real energetic, where the real painting is that space between the viewer and the wall.
Ah, yes. Yep, yep, yep.
That's where it really is. And if you see his works, they just engulf you, right? But you have large portions of the population that walk in the room and go, "What the hell's that?" and walk away.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But
No.
I've been in the Rothko room with just recently with my daughter. I'm like, "There's another one." It's like a casualty. You don't get it. Different frequency.
Yep.
You
Yep.
never. I
Interesting.
always think of it this way: people, you've got plankton and a mountain lion. They're both
Yep.
alive. They're both on the earth, but they'll never connect. They'll never connect. It's not possible,
Right.
and they shouldn't connect.
Right.
The mountain lion shouldn't be down there, and plankton shouldn't be up there. And it's the same thing here. You know, honestly, you just if you're 102.1, you're not going to connect with 99.5. So
Interesting. Interesting. So where did you discover Rothko? Like, was that part of your early learning, or is that something that's more recent in influence?
Oh no, no. I in school I had rigorous art history lectures
Oh,
that
okay.
were.
Okay.
I mean, it was, man. I what an amazing. I had one professor in particular that I kept going back to, and I was really lucky because the faculty that I was in, obviously there were some. Yeah, there were courses that I had to take, and there were others that were electives and whatever else, and so it was a given that I was that I was going to learn under him for what 2 years, I guess it was, and
Cool.
rigorous, like rigorous. A lot of it's funny because I've studied a lot of conceptual art, postmodernism, things that aren't even don't have anything to do with what I do, and
Right.
I've taught a lot of more sort of time based. Uh, I've taught a lot of things that are out of my own realm uh, because I'm educated. Uh, I would say quite fully, especially in 20th century art, 20th, 21st century contemporary modernism, postmodernism, etc. So when with Rothko, well, naturally, um, I gravitate towards the big,
Okay.
attack canvas, New
Yes.
York school, abstract expressionist, 50s painters where things were painterly, things were romantic, things were about materials. It was about the elements and principles of art. It was about kind of like where I am, paintings about what you don't even know really what they are about. You know, uh, it just it just is what it
Yep.
is.
Yep.
Like you don't have to deconstruct it. Deconstruct a puddle. The puddle's perfect. It was created
Yep. Yep.
in a crevice. It's there. It has a time where it's going to exist, and it's actually a beautiful thing watching that whole process of that puddle coming from here to there, a mini lake down to nothing more than this, to nothing, to evaporation, to, well, it's still around, it's still energy, it's
I
still exists.
when you describe those things, Kirk, that which is to me what makes it kind of fascinating is the fact that when you use the word perfect, they all fit together. Like we're not necessarily aware of how they all fit together, but and this is why it's so interesting when like you think of a puddle of water, it's made up of water. It's we know that it can exist in three phases if I go to a science world, right? But with all the technology we have today, we can't make the simplest of the atom that makes up that puddle.
Exactly.
Like it's
Exactly.
stunning to me in a way. Like and yet it all like fits together perfectly.
Yeah. Like Doug, have you ever seen waves come in a lake, or Like you're quite close to the ocean. Are
Yeah,
you
yeah,
close to the
yep. The
ocean?
Pacific.
So yeah, so you just go down to Lake Ontario here, and you stare at each wave that comes in is an original configuration.
Yes, yes,
It
absolutely.
isn't like it has its own, and that's what led me to believe that. Hold on, how do we define life? Is life like we define life scientifically as it is? But to me, if it's resonating and has energy, it has its own character.
Yep.
It it uh, it yes, it sort of looks like it's following in tandem, but um, aren't we all kind of just sitting on the highway? Aren't we all just
Watching.
waiting in line? And when I look at this, it's like no, that one's different. That one's doing this. That one has an edge to
Yep,
it,
yep.
and all of a sudden, uh, that wave it goes someplace else, maybe someplace that I can't even go to, or even have any perception of yet. You
And
know,
it's there whether we are or not.
yeah, yeah. So it's we're so linear. You're right. We're so linear. We I know people leave this place. We get sad, but in actual fact, mm, we just see it from such a human level
Oh yeah.
that you know that person who's a soul having a human experience is probably going, "What's so sad? Like nothing's going on." Yeah.
Yes.
I'm,
No, I
I'm, I things haven't changed here. I've always been around, so religion plays into that to create, the bookends,
yeah,
so
no,
to speak. But,
for sure it does. Because I mean, one of the things that I always find fascinating as you address this, because I think we have identified that we have a real problem with infinity, in the sense, and this is in many ways, um, what I see from what I've looked at in your art is in a way you seem to be capturing an infinity, and for a moment. And part like I think of infinity, often we think of it going out to the cosmos, right? The infinite universe. But there's also an infinity going the other way. Like as we go into the atom and the quarks, they like we discover and have theories on more and more, but there doesn't seem to be an end. Like it just keeps going. And why I was kind of bringing that up is it's like even as the human, everything science has told us that everything we're made of came out of the earth. Like every whether it's oxygen, whether it's magnesium, whether it's um, carbon, it all comes out of the earth. But when you are talking and or to me and we're listening, what is it that goes into us that allows all of those in those material ingredients that we can like we can identify with the periodic table? What is it that goes into us that allows those to grow into us, and then eventually, as you said, and then we go away when the end of our material life is over, and we have like very little clue on what that's all about to me. But I find it
yeah,
just
it's a dichotomy, because I think what we are basically, because we're having the human experience, and
Mhm.
the human experience doesn't have really any control over those elements, but our higher self absolutely has complete control over them to do what they want, to do what, because our higher self, be it soul, the soul is all knowing and all powerful. So those are just material things, and we need material things because we're in this dimension that
Oh,
is three-dimensional, that
materiality.
um, yeah, that is made up of negative and positive, that is um, that needs a light source, that needs value and shadows, needs um, all the things that create and make a material world. But as you said earlier, when you're sleeping, there is no materialism. No. There is no materialism. You're absolutely paralyzed, and you are rendered completely. You're into a vulnerable position, but you're still in a form of
Yeah,
consciousness, and it's a different consciousness.
yeah,
It's a different level of
yeah.
consciousness, right? So
It's amazing.
yeah,
That's to me why it's so intriguing to have this conversation, because I think you deal on the periphery of this with your work because of what comes out of it. Because you spend a lot of time there. You have to, because it's like it's not manufactured, as you said earlier on, right?
right, right,
And I think it's
yeah,
pulling that, whether it be from joy to suffering, from pain to happiness, those emotions that we undergo become color and shape to you in
hmm
what you create. Like to me, it's like uh, I don't know how I find it quite thrilling and amazing at the same time, like how that comes out, especially. And this is what I said to you, I think, in the last podcast was when you see art on the wall. By and large, it's two dimension, right? But when you get a chance to talk to the person that created it, it becomes something much more.
hmm
And if you connected with it, like in some way, like how you connected with some of your professors, right? You mentioned, or connected even at 14 with, was it Camila Caron? Is that who? Ceron?
Camille Pissarro.
Pissarro. Um, it's almost inexplicable that happened, but like you can't deny the connection now, right? I mean, you remembered it years from something from years and years ago,
Right.
and
Yeah.
now you're able to. Well, this is where my respect comes out. Is you've kind of dealt with the linear, shall we say, world around you, and you've gone and done your thing. And to me, that's the part that's it's 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 a beautiful human thing. It's glorifying almost.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's still elements. I mean, as an artist, I mean, there are times when things they click,
Yeah.
and where that serendipity is there, but coming back to a grounded level where you are thinking more pragmatically. There's times when, quite often, there's times I have a wall right there where I'll spend weeks analyzing things, right, and realizing that no, that needs to be. I need to glaze that. Obviously that's not, and that's part of the um, classical reality. It's odd because I'm caught somewhere between um, someone who does what I do, but there's also a master quality of classical art at play too, with the compositions, with there, as much as there is serendipity and it's spontaneous, and it's an unconscious thing. Oh, there's believe me, the placement of composition can be very deliberate.
Oh,
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. There's great thought put into, and there, mixing colors to that level, having um, that, that, uh, um, that scheme come together, was thought out, was completely, you know, as a, that was a deliberate conscious effort, you know?
yeah.
So,
It's
yeah.
it's funny as you're saying this. I can only think of this thing that I said, or not that I said, but that I'd heard once, that it doesn't make any difference unless it's done with love. And it's almost that oozes from your work. I don't know.
That's a romance. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a power word to me that goes beyond even the romantic part of it. It's it's not the cerebral part. It's the heartfelt part. And I think part of
Right.
that
Yeah.
comes from the depth of which you go to for color. And you can feel that when you look at it, but as you explain what you've gone through, your history, your influences, that just amplifies that in a way that it becomes what it is, right? It's what makes, I think it's
Well,
what makes your work attracted around the world, attractive around the world, because it connects with humanity.
um, certainly, well, that's very kind of you to say. Certainly, there is a universal quality to it because it's they're not paintings that are sort of isolated. I wouldn't say, and that's not something that I deliberately do. Certain things I do deliberately. I'm all about illusionary depth. I talk about illusionary depth. I lecture on illusionary depth. I realize that this is a two-dimensional plane, and you have to do whatever you possibly can to make it even more three-dimensional
Okay.
than the third dimension. And it's funny how flat things can become very three-dimensional. There's huge hypocritical contradictions in my paintings, and in all great art, to be honest with you, because it's just an illusion. It truly is. It's an illusion of things. And when you place something against something else, it's going to interact. It's the interaction of color. That's the theory
Hmm.
from the great Joseph Albers. The interaction of color. That you have a red and you have the same red, and if the red's against the blue, it's going to appear different than if it's against the orange. Even though it's the same,
Yep.
one will end up looking darker than the other. It'll be a different hue, but it's not. You put them together, it's the same red. And see, I've been playing around with that, and I'll say play around because it is. You don't go in like a solemn scenario where you're genuflexing or something. No, it's not that. It's it's just a natural instinct to do just as I said. And there's times when you want to be more subtle. There's time, or I want to be more subtle. There's times when I want it to be cooler or warmer, or introduce a material. Be willing to risk it all to completely destroy it at the same time.
Wow.
Every time, every time, there's always you're hinging. It's the tightrope straight across, the Hudson River. It's like, which I don't think anybody's ever done, but it's just. But I imagine that because it's the capital of
Yes.
art. So yeah, where you're always on that edge, and that go back to the word tension.
Yes.
Those experiences are left as an imprint, and in the end, it's a moment captured in time.
Yes.
So
No,
yeah,
no, it's true. But like I said, I love hearing how you capture that work because it makes it just more full all the time. It's one of those things that I like hearing I love hearing musicians talk about music, and I also like how even authors talking about how they put together that combination of words, and you're doing that with I'll call it, can I call it paint, color, it's
yeah, paint color, but it's mostly process,
yes, yeah,
and it's all This is the I say this because I'm looking at them. The end result. This is the final application uh, that it's a personification of a process, really, and I'm
yes,
personalizing it.
yes,
You know what
yes,
I mean?
yep,
Because it's so Doug, I can't see these are living beings because I can't sleep in my room with paintings in my room. Too
yeah,
much energy.
yep,
Feel the energy.
yep, I
Not
get it.
bad energy, but it's energy. Like I don't even have paintings up on my. I live in a place high ceilings, but no paintings on the walls. There isn't any point.
Interesting.
Uh, Stacks of paintings and everything else, but no, no, this is no art. There's no art gallery. Nope, no. Um, it's a place where music is played a lot. There's a lot of painting, but there's nothing up on walls. You know.
Do you get a lot from film at all? Like you mentioned music a
Um,
lot. Does film have an impression on you? Influence you in any way?
um, it really depends. I analyze when I'm watching a film, um, cinema.
Mm.
I'm always analyzing. I'm the guy when you go to a concert. I'm looking up at the all the girders in the top and all the metal in the top, watching this. Though the lights hit off of it, sometimes that's better up there than what's going on down there. You know. Um, oh yeah, like what's wrong with this guy? Like what? Great date. Seriously, took him to see so and so, and he's staring at the ceiling. It's true though.
I can believe it. I
So
can believe it.
yeah, I analyze. Yeah, in which what I end up doing, if I can, I'll try to, I'll try to find stills so I can, because
Okay.
it'd be one snippet, but it was so quick, and it's just like, geez, that was such a beautiful composition, the way it looked there. So I go back and I try to find it, and yeah, so everything's very pictorial.
Mm.
Everything is, um, you know, although I have absolutely no narrative in my work, I enjoy the notion of narrative being drawn into things and film and whatnot. And I lecture and I teach and I, quite often speak of narrative because it's not like me. It's not about me. It's not like a bunch of little Kirk Sutherland minions.
Right, right.
No, they're their own people, and yeah, I rather enjoy seeing that there is originality out there that is obviously different than what I do. It's refreshing. So
Do you think
yeah,
our exposure to, I'll call it the internet, but I really mean information. So if we go back to when you discovered some of your early influences around, like you said, grade 10, um, that information was not nearly what was available, what is available today to us. Do you find it is like a candy store like no other, or do you find it more of a distraction than anything?
can be. It could be really really handy, but I find that it can drain you. It can
Right.
drain you physically. There's so many distractions going on because there's so many things.
Yes.
Um, yeah, it's so quick and fast, Doug. It's not like back in the day when every place you went. So my first time I went to New York, it was blown away, just blown away, and like that changed my life. There was no internet, there wasn't any
Yeah.
computers
Yeah.
that you know. Yeah, it was back in the '80s, right? So I took whatever I could creatively here and there. You were buying books, and
Yep.
they had huge invitations and stuff for their art shows. There was a Frank Stella exhibit, and their paintings I remember were going for about $5 million. And I remember looking down, and I would suspect it really is the real person. Steve Martin
Okay.
bought one of the paintings. Now, it might have been another Steve Martin, but I'm just saying it probably wasn't.
Right.
So these things came out of the wall. They were aluminum pieces that came out of the wall 4 or 5, 6 feet. Uh, they went right into the wall, right into where the stud is in the wall, and they were extremely heavy and extremely expensive. And everywhere I went, it was almost a religious experience. It was at that event at that time that I went into the Monet room, and up to that point in my life, I was not a very spiritual person. I would probably lead on that I was,
Right.
but I didn't feel much. I actually, if you could say saw God, I saw God that day. I
Really?
started crying. I was in that room and it hit me. I didn't realize it was just another room I was going into in an incredible place that was continuously influencing me, and then it was overwhelming.
Oh, wow.
It was overwhelming. It was just like I didn't know what to do. You know,
So is
yeah.
this because of the size of what Monet had put together in the art exhibit? What
Everything,
everything?
everything. You know, um, see, you got to remember with Monet, these were paintings that he was doing when he could still see quite well. Uh, they were all, it was a water lily room, so it's one after the other. It
Oh,
was very, very purple. Um, the room was constructed for the paintings, I believe. Um, and it was the environment
oh,
where I was alone. Even though I was there with another person, I was absolutely alone, and it was actually overwhelming. It was absolutely overwhelming.
oh, that's
Which,
cool.
up to that point, yes, of course, everyone, art student, whatever else, you know Monet. It's like knowing Wayne Gretzky if you're
Hockey
Sidney
player.
Crosby if you're a hockey player. I mean, it
Right.
was the obvious thing, but a whole different story when it's like lacing on the skates and going out on the ice. I was right there with Monet, and it was everything, the energy, whatever it was, energetically, it changed me. And it
Really.
was a positive thing. It was a life-changing experience. It
So,
really was,
Kirk,
that room.
how old would you have been then?
Um, mm, Honestly, by the time I got there, 20.
So,
You got to think. Like, yeah, just that. Yeah.
so did that in a way kind of solidify this is what I'm gonna do?
No, I already knew what I was going to do.
Like
Yeah.
this was
Yeah.
just
All the way through high school, I knew what I was going to do.
oh,
I
that
was
that's
the,
cool.
yeah, I would even, no, I walked around as a crazy artist. Yeah.
So
It was,
did when you said this, like, was it like this is what it can be?
had nothing to do with me.
Interesting,
Um,
interesting, interesting.
yeah, no, it wasn't even like I feel like painting. No, it wasn't that at all. And it wasn't like coming face to face with a religious icon.
Right.
It was something. There was more to it than that. It wasn't your typical. You go up and you go, "This is incredible." You look at it closely. You look at the brushstrokes. You're in awe because that person created. No, none of those things. It uh, it wasn't even a human experience, really.
Oh wow.
It
That's
it took me to this other place, and you know, uh, which kicked off a completely lifelong love affair with his work. I lecture on him when I can. Matter of fact, his later paintings that no one talks about, when he did have cataracts and he couldn't see, were just brilliant.
wow.
He was abstract expressionism in the 20s before the 50s.
It was
He was making things that were sincerely, you looked at them and like, well, that looks like a painting could have been made in 1965. No, it was 1920 whatever.
oh
And
wow. Wow.
and it was Monet. Yeah, I'd put a paintbrush on a 6 foot um like pole, like and he'd paint from 6 feet away. so he could see it like the viewer or whatever it
Oh,
was.
wow.
He always had a cigarette in his mouth, and he was painting away. Huge canvases for the time,
Yeah.
massive canvases. You know, conventionally, paintings were never really, in a lot of cases, not that large.
Right. Right.
They were, he would he'd paint these big engulfing things, and it was a repeated theme, which was an um, artificial garden that he made. It wasn't even yet. He went and bought land, left Paris, and created this water lily pond because he was enthralled, always enthralled with Japanese art. And he had
Well,
this little bridge that went over, and he painted it over and over again, and it consistently changed all the time. Sometimes you wouldn't even recognize what it was,
wow.
you know.
It's because I remember I can't remember whether this was in London or New York. So I think there's a Tate art museum in London, and this could have been is that MoMA in New York, but
Yep.
they were gigantic canvases. Like
Mhm.
they were like I want to say they were the one I saw. They were like 10 or 12 or 16, like they were huge, huge canvases. And that was the part, like for me it wasn't life changing, but this is when I saw Monet and I thought this is kind of
Mhm.
cool. And so with you saying this here is like I'm getting a chance to participate on what you experienced, which was kind of like that's a pretty special thing to do because I like those are the connections to me that are very big in our lives, and they're inexplicable but incredibly
Yeah.
real, right?
Yeah. And he's a quintessential colorist. But
Really, right?
there are, you know, he's a master. And Matisse was a master colorist. He just absolutely Hoffman, a master
Wow.
colorist. Um, these are these are the people that I look at, and people that you can never get enough of.
Wow.
Um, but all in all, in the end, Hoffman probably would be the one that, going to New York, although I had that religious experience or that spiritual experience,
Yes.
it was a Hoffman that changed, you know, seeing his work changed my aesthetic,
Oh, wow.
changed the way I saw things. From a painterly level, from the level of what I want to do,
Right,
how do
right,
I want to
right.
construct it. It like, I don't want to repeat myself. Did I mention last time the small Hoffman I came?
I don't recall you mentioning that because I like
All right.
I don't this is a painting that you're talking about, right?
Yes. Like, so I didn't give Hoffman much thought because when, you know, you're, it's like anything else. There's a hierarchy. There are the artists that consistently are talked about, just like musicians that are always talked about. Or it's like, and they're the ones that are you define
Yes.
they're defining a movement or whatever else. Hoffman could never really be. He was a difficult one because one day he could be doing this and the next day he'd be doing that, and he couldn't be pinned down. And there was an art critic named Clement Greenberg, and he was very, very powerful, extremely powerful. And there were I like to think of two movements, but it was one and the same: abstract expressionism, the New York school. But there was I like to call it a sub movement or a movement in itself called color field.
Oh,
And he really had a lot of influence and power over these artists. And he could not fathom Hoffman because he couldn't just,
kind of
you know, put his finger on what he was doing. and because he couldn't control it, or control him or whatever it was, uh, it infuriated him. But
Yes.
Hoffman, as a colorist, oh man, that's what I was confronted with. And one morning, actually, it was the first day, full day of being in New York. Um, I was feeling a little under the weather because I was having a few libations the night before. So you know, um, yeah,
Not
I was
nothing wrong with
feeling a
that.
little gray. So yeah, so uh, get to the I think it was the Met. Yeah,
Okay.
the Metropolitan Museum. Get to the Met, and we're walking through, and I had to use the washroom. So I'm going down this dark corridor, and it's sort of like you go down and lights sort of come on when you're walking down type thing, because I remember it was dark and not really accessible. And right where the light switch was, it's funny, it was a public washroom, but there was a light switch on the outside. There was a small Hoffman. And I was thinking to myself, even here, there's art. Even in this hallway, dark hallway, beside, I felt it. It was mysterious to me that there's a light switch, there's a Hoffman. You're this far away. And I'm looking at it, and it just seems so odd to me.
Yeah.
It's so domestic. I don't know what it was. But it startled me, just like I just saw, I spiders are tiny, but we still look at them and do this, right?
Right,
It
right.
was, yeah, we got a house spider, you do this. Well, that was what happened with the Hoffman. Like, oh, what's that? Oh, hmm. Here I am feeling a little under the weather, and I'm alone with Hoffman. And it was
Oh,
dark. And it wasn't, once again, it was not a bad thing. It was strange. It was a strange feeling because, like myself, I know Hoffman was following his instincts. He was doing what he had to do, and it came from another place, although he was a master. And that energy, that reality, it was not made, it was not created to be beside that light switch, but just through what the world is and serendipity, there it was, boom. Just like something goes on here and then it lands up in Zurich. Like,
you know,
or maybe it won't. Maybe it lands up nowhere. Maybe it stays in my archives. Well, whatever. But the thing is, that's a strange thing. Like there you are. And it didn't take any thought. It just went, it went the way it was supposed to go. And it's right in front of me right now. And that was, yeah, I have to say that was pretty spiritual too. Yeah, because I never forgot about it.
well,
And
that
it
you're
was so
that,
thick, and it was so impasto, and it was just so there, and it was so trusting to have this thing there
wow.
that was, created by the master. And you know what, it was, if you slipped or misjudged, you'd have your fingers all over Hoffman and not a light switch. That's how strange this was. It's just so ungallery-esque,
Yep.
really.
What's
And I love it. I love the obscurity of that, right?
it's really interesting that you made note of it. Like that you recognize that, right? Like like that was that 40 years ago? 35 years ago?
Oh, that was a long time ago. Yeah.
And it's still
And
in your head.
yeah. And see, I had a tendency, well, you're with people sometimes who wouldn't understand that, or you're dating people that wouldn't have a clue. And if you said that, they just tell you to shut up. Like, what, don't you have something more important to talk about? Yeah. So you just sort of, you
Well,
kind of,
you're kind of like you're recognizing the genius beside the mundane, right? Like it's like this switch is every day. We see it every day. And here's a small There's not another one in the world, and you're seeing the almost the juxtaposition between the two. That is like it's kind of staggering in many ways. But to your point, how many would even see it? Like it's just, oh
Yeah.
yeah, it's another painting that somebody stuck beside the light switch, right? And some would note it as, that's a really not a very good place to put a print. To your point, not a very good place to put a painting, because people are going to knock it off the wall because it's right beside the light switch.
Hmm.
Completely missing this. Well, you've set Hoffman and set a pretty high standard with him. Um, it's like even like recognizing the like in essence, it's like seeing this diamond beside a light switch, right?
Yeah, and even the light switch itself was designed by somebody at some point too. So there's creativity
Oh wow.
originally
Okay, yeah.
embedded there because everything around us has been designed, it seems, whether, just for pure practical reasons or not. But hey, you never know, Doug, if you were to come from, another civilization, you may come down and that would be the most fascinating thing you've ever seen, you know? And that's what the Dadaists were. They were all about. Dadaism was all about reevaluating. We've been told and conditioned that
Yes.
gold is worth more than wood,
Yes. Yep.
and so it's just assumed. But if you came down from another place, that may be useless to you. It may be totally useless to you.
Yes. Yep.
A light switch may be have more value than the pyramids. You know, I'm just saying.
No,
It's
I
we
get
are
your point.
completely conditioned, and we're also dictated by other people's opinions.
Oh,
Every law,
oh, for sure.
every rule, everything that goes on, someone had to create that hierarchy,
Yep.
and that we just follow it.
Well, it's the world we live in, right? It's the world. It's part of
Yeah.
civilization. Where like I'm quite fascinated by where it even started. Like, how did it start? How did we try to figure out how to live together from the so-called hunter-gatherers? And I think in many ways, much of history's probably even forgotten some of it, right? Because we've been in this existence for so long. But when you think, I was saying earlier on, like in having this conversation, the person was saying like over 50% of all life is below the surface of the ocean,
Mm.
which to me, we've only been able to go there over the last 100 years.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
that's an incredibly short time from the point of view of how long we've supposed to have been around for.
Mm.
It's like what else are we going to find? Like it's just it's those are points that I find, or I'm gravitated I'm attracted to, because I find like where did they come? Where did they come from? Where, like, how did they, you mentioned a tree, like science has given us that there's photosynthesis and they need water and they need sunlight. Well, great, but we couldn't create one if we wanted to.
No. No. And we don't know when we talk about consciousness or even intelligence.
Yes.
Do you really have to have ears to hear? Do you really have to have a brain to be conscious and think? Um, does all this mean that you can't have a personality? We don't know
No.
because we're not, I think we can be at one, but we kind of choose not to be because we feel we're superior. And we're
Oh yeah.
really, I mean, without the tree, we don't exist.
No. Like when you say that, I find it kind of interesting as far as where I think, I mean, it's already come apart, but as well, I'll call it artificial intelligence for lack of a better word. But when you talked about intelligence, for the longest time we've thought like if someone can come and, as an example, they could recite the manifest of the Titanic to you as an example, like, at a social gathering party or something, we'll go, wow, that's pretty impressive, you can remember that. But in our world today, I mean, we can literally in seconds with our phone, find that information out. So
Yep.
that part of what we've recognized as being intelligence is not going to be around that much longer, because all these technology systems for pulling information out are just going to get better. I think what we're going to find, and this is, I come back again to your art, because I feel that there's a you're pulling from something that is not the internet, as an example, right?
Right.
You're not pulling from a data set. You're not pulling from a neural network. We're all absorbed in all these things in our modern world, but that's not where you're pulling from. You're pulling from something different. And I think what we're going to see, and probably not in the too distant future, is that intelligence that's a support, that's pull, that comes from the idea of knowing facts and bringing them forward. It's going to become not seen as what it once was, because we're all going to have access to it. It's going to be someone that puts it together in a unique way, that's where, to me, the intelligence will start to come together. So in a
Right. Right.
way, that's the artist, right? Is pulling these things together. Even how you describe Hoffman, like, often we don't like it when we can't put a person in the it's a square in a round hole, as an example, right? We've been
Right. Right.
conditioned in our world to, like, we're uncomfortable with that. So when you defy kind of a description in our modern way of talking, I think many are struggling with that. I mentioned earlier on, even Dylan, Bob Dylan, which I find so fascinating. When he went electric, I mean, again, that's like 60 years ago, but that following, just, you can't do that. You're a folk singer, like, and this is coming from his fans, and it's like, but this is what I want to do now. This is what I am now. This is what I want to
Hmm.
do. And I think that we're going to see that from the intelligence perspective get adjusted too, because we're just, like, you can talk to Siri now, or Alexa, or whatever. And, like, how old was Paul Newman when he died, right? Like, you don't have to remember that stuff anymore.
I know. Yeah. Yeah. It's it's true. It's ingenuity, and that's what art really is in the end.
Yes, yes.
I consistently say, I just had a semester just started where I'm lecturing, and the very first day, I always sort of kick it off with, "What is art? What is art?" And in the end, um, everybody that said something, it's also according to the universal law of free will, because that is a very subjective reality, and there is no right or wrong. So art is everything and nothing. And in the
At the
end,
same
all I
time.
can say, and all I say to them, and I repeat it quite often, it has very little to do with this thing that's up on a wall. No, that's not art. Art is ingenuity. Art's invention. Art is
Beautiful.
creating something, moving something. Uh, they'd mentioned emotions. Of course, emotions are connected, but in the end, it's that process. It's that process itself.
Uh,
Um, I've had students come up to me and say, like, why did I get an 87? It's a piece of garbage. It's like, no, that I I followed your process. You're communicating with me the whole time. I knew where you're going. I didn't have to see it. We don't have to see it. We really don't even have to see it. You've given me evidence that it's here.
yes.
I have the evidence. Here's the process. You've substantiated it. You've given me reflection on it. I'm not being subjective. I'm following a rubric which is completely objective. You get an 87.
Yep.
There's no feeling involved in that, but it is what it is. But art is everything and nothing, and in the end, ingenuity has everything to do with it. So what do we define art as being? It's everything and nothing, as I said.
It's
Um,
when you said that, Kirk, it's almost like it's the essence of what it is to be human.
yeah, yeah,
Like,
and 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 it's also oddly enough, as you said earlier, to be aware of it.
well, to me,
Yeah,
that is
yeah,
that's a pretty big thing because it's like the saying, "Stop and smell the roses." I mean, that's kind of like what that is. And we get so caught up in our modernity. I don't know whether that's a word or not, but that we you kind of forget some of those things. And to me, they're almost more important. Like it just is. It's like
yeah.
and and that awareness. Like I love your story about the seeing the Monet and seeing in in a similar sense. Like so the Monet is big, it's overwhelming almost in its actuality. And then you see this much smaller Hoffman, and yet it having an impact. Well, you remember both of them, so they both had
Yeah.
enormous impact on you. And it's like like recognizing those and being having the awareness to do that. And so, with we said earlier, with all the distraction today, it becomes more and more challenging to me to accept that. And that's why I think it's so important to humanity. And I think we're going to move through some of this stuff in a different way. So that's to me that's why it's great to talk with you because I feel like I'm touching almost that sense of the sense of the unconscious, the sense of our humanity, the sense of how like we're so advanced that we can't even create a hydrogen atom, like as an example, right? Like it just
Mm.
there are things that just don't. You said earlier that don't connect, like they're just not there.
And you know
And
what?
to
We ought not to know everything either. I mean, the thing is, this is the challenge we have. We're consistently trying to define. We're consistently trying to um, mm, factualize things. When in actual fact, why don't we just live in the experience? Why don't we just live in the experience? Why don't we, you know, just look at your surroundings. Look at what you actually have power over, and not in a domain way.
yes,
But I'm in this room. I can only deal with this room.
yes, yeah,
This is what I can't deal with anything. Not deal, but I can't change anything in the exterior world. Uh, and why not just be in my own experience?
yeah,
Because that's the most important thing of all. It's the experience that you have, and with that, um, it it certainly propels you to the positive side of things, even if your experience is negative.
yeah,
Um, you can be in that moment and say, "I've experienced that sensation." You
yeah,
know, like when my dad died,
mm,
I uh, I was I was I guess in shock
mm,
until the day of his funeral. And you can do many things. You can drown yourself in alcohol. You can go to a doctor. You can get Ativan. You can do all kinds of things if you want to do that. And I'm an artist,
right,
and I said to myself, and this is no different than anybody else. I'm not any, it's not a special thing. But I said to myself, this is a gift that's been given to me. I feel so I feel
mm,
I
interesting.
feel so heartbroken right now. I felt heartbroken before. This is different
Uh,
because it's a unique experience.
mhm,
I want to I want to feel every single solitary aspect of it. So I can actually
mm,
take that with me and say that I now have an understanding of that experience, that feeling, those emotions. Um, because you can't have an understanding just from theory,
Right.
just from a concept, from memorization. No, 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 no. You actually have to be in love to understand love. You have to be behind a car, not read a manual to know that there's trucks coming by you
Yeah.
3 feet on either side.
Yep.
That's the experience. And once you have the experience, you then have an understanding. And that understanding, um, it's very much a worldly scenario, but it's also, you know what? It goes to a different place as well. Because we're meant to experience. We're
Absolutely.
we're meant to, you know, sort of going full circle here with stagnation, I think. But nonetheless, that's important. And because of that, it probably changed my art.
Oh, I would
Yeah,
imagine it for sure. Like
another bunch of tools I have.
your
Yeah.
your dad was a good man. He was because I knew your dad, and
Mhm.
he was he was always a super friendly man. Like he was just a really kind man. We'd see him at hockey. He was always very friendly. Always said hi, and
Yeah. Yeah.
that's a really cool thing. When you mention that, I can't help but think of a couple of things that. So I read. I'd like to say I read a lot of C.S. Lewis, but I have a lot of his books. I just find him. I'm slow at reading him, but he had two books that he wrote. One with I think something about pain, and the other was about losing his wife, surprised by joy. And exactly to what you said about experience, he wrote an intellectual book on pain, and then he wrote a book on experiencing pain after the death of his wife.
Right.
And there's such a shift in the perspective that to your point, it's one of the things that it's almost like we're believing we can actually go through these things without experiencing them and know what they are. And it's just it really it'll almost becoming convinced them. And you've recognized this that it doesn't work that way, right? Like you can't well even with the best simulations, driving a car is different than driving a video and it
Right.
or
Yeah.
reading about it or how it is. And it's to me one of those things that it'll be interesting to see where our future goes. But we still, to me, that's why the art becomes so important. Like it just like we need that. I may have shared this with you. This quote, I think this comes from Winston Churchill back in the Second World War, and Britain was really struggling with funding for what they were trying to armaments and stuff like that. So
Right.
the finance guy, you may have heard this quote, apparently came to Churchill and he said, we could sell parts of our art museums and work. And Churchill's reply to him, who apparently was always a cultural individual, was, I thought that's what we were fighting for.
Right. Exactly.
And it kind of pins exactly what we're talking about here in many ways. It's like it's a huge part of that non-tangible part of our life, which is, as I said earlier, makes up more of the existence than the actual material part does. And
Hmm.
you're touching it. You're demonstrating. You're showing us that in a way that, and you've shared that obviously with the Monet and the Hoffman experience too. To me, it's just become more real to me all the time. I just find it fascinating that we could cast it away, that we could not pay attention to it. And when you become open to it, well, all I can say is watch out because
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And you become open to it. Uh,
it's everywhere.
cer- well, certainly when you gain an understanding. Once you've gained an understanding, then um, it's it's odd because it almost, when you say gain and understanding, you become sage or something. But
No,
no, no, that's not it. It tends to be from a, a, a far more, I believe, more of an emotional level
yep,
than anything.
yes,
That when you mentioned about words, you can't. There isn't a word to describe that. Gaining an understanding of something truly, there isn't any really. There's no words, because the understanding
it's
itself
deeper.
far surpasses language.
Yes, yes.
You know,
It's very deep, and when you realize it, it becomes much more. Well, it's the experience again, Kirk. Well, as you're describing it, right? You can't go, as an example, you can't go through the death of a parent without going through the experience of death of a parent. You can read about it all you want,
yeah,
but it's like until I think you've been through that, you you can't imagine that. Like for me, you've gone through that. I haven't. So I can appreciate, I can be empathetic about it, but to say that I can really understand it, I don't, how do you do that? How do you do that? I don't know. I find
right.
it's interesting you brought death up because it's one of the things that I struggle with because I don't think I've had anyone close to me pass away.
Mm,
Like I mean like a best friend, a family member. Like there's been distant people like that I know, but I said for me to understand when I've talked to different friends about losing parents or siblings, I can empathize, but I can't. I haven't gone through that experience. I don't know. I feel. I know this sounds weird, but I feel inadequate in a way because I can't like I can talk about it, I can share it, but I can't in a deep set. You said like there's not words there. You just it's just in you.
right.
I don't have that in me yet.
Yeah. It wouldn't be inadequacy. No, it wouldn't be that. It's not that at all. It's nothing more than just looking at, you know, you go to a store and there's all kinds of fruits and vegetables and whatever else, and it just happens to be that, you know, the plums aren't there today. It doesn't mean that you don't have a great understanding of all that.
Right.
They're plums, you know. And going back to the grander scheme, this is very human stuff, but in the end, when you take the human experience out of it, uh, my dad didn't go anywhere. Oh, sorry, he went somewhere, but the energy's still there.
Oh
He
yes.
just changed form,
Yeah.
basically, right?
Yeah.
So no, he didn't go anywhere. He's you know, call it a place where there's no time or space. I don't know. I'm not aware of it as a different dimension. We're in a very dense dimension here in three-dimensional world that we live in of materialism, where we've decided to come here where there is uh, um, where there's confines, where there's restrictions.
Yeah.
We've come to a place where there's restrictions. So if the soul is all knowing and all powerful, we choose to experience in a place that it has built in from the very beginning challenges.
No
And
question.
most of those challenges, almost all those challenges, are other people.
Yes.
You know, they really are.
No.
Yeah.
Very true.
Because even if that animal wants to eat you, it doesn't want to eat you because it's being malicious, or that that animal is trying to is a narcissist. You know, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
It just is. You know, it just is what it is, right?
I
So
need food
the
and
flood
you're
came in. The flood isn't, you know, inherently sociopathic. You know, it's no.
yeah.
We're and then I say good. There's positive and negative, and then there's the positivity that can come from the human experience too as well, right? But
Well, to me, that's what that's. that's what um, art captures on multiple levels, right? And that's why when I looked at your sway yesterday, I think it was yesterday, but it might have been Sunday. Like it again just had like, well, the colors first struck, but then you had like almost some shape to, like a central part to it, and it was like it's speaking to me in a different way than some of your previous work has done. But it was there, and you noticed it, and you felt it. I felt it, and so I can only imagine what it's like to see it on a wall, like in real, like not just a picture of it. So
Yeah, there's the yeah, because it is a painting, and there is texture to it, and there's glazing throughout it. There's aspects to it where the canvas itself, the thread of the canvas kind of shows through and whatnot as well. Um, just the way it dried and the way it was actually painted. But oddly enough, I was looking at it on Sunday, and my was it Sunday? Yeah, it was Sunday, and I said to my daughter, oddly enough, doesn't it? It looks like I've never really been massively influenced by Georgia O'Keeffe.
oh,
When you look at that painting, it has the it certainly has like the undertones of some of her works in the 30s, and I'm like, not only from a color composition point of view, but also from just a formal point of view.
you
Like,
know, it's
yeah,
interesting you said that. I haven't thought of her before in looking at your work, but your color has that vividness to it. And like I now I'm gonna go back and look at that again with with
no,
that thought
she
you
was
had,
she
because it's
was
like I find her, like, there's so many artists that I find fascinating, but I find some of her work is like, and mainly it's not so much the subject to me, it's the color
yeah,
that just
yeah,
almost, like, some of her, I'll call them flowers, they almost like they reach out and swallow you.
yeah,
The color,
yeah.
like it just has that vividness. And I have seen a couple of her originals, I believe, in museum. But again, a lot, that's again one of the great things to me that's cool about the internet is, I think I may have told you this the last time, but with our speed that we go through stuff, I now almost instantly know what I like. I didn't know it was
Mhm,
like that for me.
mhm.
Like it's like I see it and it's like, oh, I
Yeah,
like
like
that.
boom. Yeah,
And
yeah.
and your work is like that for me. So it's that's a credit to you. Like I was gonna say, it's neat that I get a chance to talk to you, because I get a whole
Well,
background kind
thank
of
you.
on how this all
Yeah,
works, right? Especially when you think we kind of spent our formative years literally in almost the same environment, right?
right. Yeah,
Which is kind of
yeah,
fun.
yeah. And it's at a certain time when you could mention people or places or uh, just as I said about experience, where you would, if I mentioned, you know, walking down a particular street,
Yes.
and you'd be able to, or a merchant or a store, or just being in, because it really was a small town,
Oh,
really was.
well, you know what'll make you laugh? Like I will go and Appleton and Hughes.
Yeah, yeah,
Like I can remember my dad going to get suits from your dad at Appleton and Hughes,
right, yeah, yeah,
Robinson Park.
yeah.
Like we know where, like when you mentioned the old library on Main Street, right?
Yeah, and you know what? That was a great piece of architecture. It really was a very
It
interesting,
sure was.
unique.
Yep.
It was. It had sort of a 1960s modern esque. Everything was in orange. There's orange, and it just, I think these places were just gems,
Oh yeah.
you know,
Oh yeah.
and
And it's
the Roxy Theater, Tommy's Drive-In.
yep.
These are all
Well,
places.
what's
You know?
odd now is kind of where we grew up. That's my folks still live in the same place. Um, that is still like the same. But
Yeah,
when I go back to Markham, it's like that dream where you're trying to figure out where you are. Like it's changed so much to me.
I don't even like it anymore,
Yeah,
really.
I'm
I got to tell you the truth. Um, it feels like nobody's left. Like there's nobody familiar that I can go and see because I don't think like none of my friends. Uh, nobody lives there now.
yep,
Nobody
yep.
could afford to probably.
No,
You
it's
know, just life will send you here and there, but the changes, things have been paved over, things have been removed,
oh yeah.
and I guess that is progress, and it's every every right for that to happen, but hmm, and I'm not painting a perfect picture, but it was pretty damn good.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean,
Yeah, like it was
it's a
if
great
there was a I know it's a Canadian town,
right.
but it could have also been middle America. You know, it really like I mean that's why they do so much filming up there and whatnot. Um,
Yes.
it was safe. It was I
Good
don't
place to
know.
grow up.
Like yes, this I just remember the sun shining there. I remember that
Yep.
it was bright.
No.
Um,
And with
it was there were some really funny people there. It was
true
people that
enough.
everyone kind of laughed at. It's
You had the town characters for sure, and it was like, but I mean, it's like that's why I said around that the park is kind of this little haven that hasn't changed very much. They've done a few houses, but nothing like
yeah,
they we thought they were going to do. And so when I go back there, which is not that often, where I'm usually back maybe a couple times a year, it's just like that place is the same. But as soon as I go to Markham, like Markham, Highway 7 or Markham Road or McCowan, like I don't know where it is anymore. Like, are you kidding me?
yeah,
Like it's just a really kind of a changed world, which is really interesting. Like I said, with your experience in coming out of there in the art world, it's like, okay, this is we don't know how this whole thing's gonna work, right?
yeah. I should retrace what I said. It's not that hmm, I think I might have been saying that it because I'm comparing it to yesteryear or something,
Right.
but it's still a fine place. It's a wonderful place. Whatever else, it's
Yes.
just I guess, um, and of course it's not going to be the same, but I just don't feel the same when I'm there. I
I'm
don't know if you feel it.
oh, I'm like if my folks didn't live there, I probably wouldn't go back there.
Yeah,
That's just
it. There's a. Do you think so? We talk about energies and whatnot.
yep.
Do you feel the energy's changed? There's an energy that's changed. It's not. I don't know what it is. It just doesn't seem. It seems to be. It's not bad energy. It's not bad energy. No, but nothing's drawing me there. I don't feel the allure. you know. You know. And not that
Um,
there's anything really there to have that happen, but um, mm,
it's an interesting thing that you kind of brought up here because I think of it sometimes um like I remember going back as an adult and finding everything looked much smaller than I remembered it, like in the neighborhood.
yeah.
Like that was the first thing. But the other part of it to me is um that was a part of my life that was I'll say was good. There's some excellent parts to it, excellent memories, but they are no more. Um, like
Right.
that's just not where my life is anymore. And so
Mhm.
much has changed, like you were mentioning, like it just seems like it's houses and banks now kind of thing. Like,
Well, yeah, and that's the thing, right? When we exactly, it's no different now than if you go to Markham, it might as well be Brampton, or it might as well be Oakville, or it might as well be Whitby, or whatever. It's just a series of box malls, and I think what I was trying to get to in a lot of ways, yes, there are some things that are going to be permanent and they're going to stay there, but so many things have gone
yes,
that it doesn't feel, it's not familiar anymore.
that's
And and
that,
and I guess if I stayed there, I'd see much more of a gradual scenario, and it wouldn't be so jarring to the system. But there's times when you drive down a road, you're like, "What happened?" Like, honest to goodness, that was like I had memories in that house, or that whatever. It's long since gone. Why?
it's
Why? There's nothing wrong with it. Why is it gone? You know, and I realize that's not a decision I have to make.
right.
That's somebody, and I'm glad we live in a world where someone can make that decision and have the freedom to do so. But it still will affect me emotionally because you have a fond affection for an area, and now it's just a memory. There's nothing there in this material world
Yeah.
that is three dimensional and still standing. Right. So
Well, it's someone had said this to me is like when you leave a place, your brain kind of keeps it in the same way that it was when you lived there. And now it's been so long since we lived there
yeah,
that it's not at all what I really remember. And so
exactly.
that's the part. And what I remember and what it is now, it's not really a place I want to go to. That's the essence of what it is. I want to go there to see my folks, mom and dad. They're in the same house, so like even that kind of messes your brain up a little bit.
Yeah, yeah,
But it's just not like okay, this yeah, this was once was, but it's no longer. And so I
yeah.
just have to accept it and remember it as a memory because you still have dreams, right? I still go back in dreams and you have dreams and stuff like that of it, but I'm with you. It's just changed so much, and like you say, progress, yes, but that part of my brain didn't progress in the avenue that it has progressed to. The progress didn't really happen. It just stayed the same. That quaint little place that was wonderful to grow up in. There's no question to me, as you said. But like I think of like the old arena, right? You think of like we left when Markville was built. Like I left. So even coming back to see Markville there, like that's a whole nother shift in your kind of brain. Then they moved where Kennedy Road was, and it was like, what? Like, is that so
Mm,
those are some of the things I
yeah.
remember, but I think you hit it right on, was that it's it was a great place to grow up in, but that's not my memory anymore. It may still be a good place to grow up in, but I'm not living there.
No, no, and I just, it's just sort of just kind of a strange feeling because
It is.
uh, yeah, I will usually only go there because of mm, an appointment or a meeting or
Sure.
whatever else that just happens to be
Yeah.
there. And I do drive around the old neighborhood, and I've driven by your parents' house and
Yep.
whatnot. Yeah, and it looks like the same.
Yep.
It looks the same.
Because it is.
Yeah, all those houses with Tudor style and
Yep.
everything. They were the browns and the yellow ochres and everything, just stunning, beautiful. I mean, honestly, that creates a synesthesia thing going when you see that the
Yeah.
lines and everything
Yep.
else. They're warm and friendly, and I used to deliver newspapers to all those people.
Yes.
So
Um.
you would enter not very deeply, but you
Yep.
would slightly enter their dwellings,
Yep.
right? It sunken living rooms. I remember they were
Yes.
these groovy pads, and they were mid-century,
Yep.
and
That's the time
um,
when they were built. Right on. Like.
yeah, I mean it. A lot of character and whatnot, and when you remove those things, there isn't a whole lot of character with what's being replaced.
Well,
It's
I sometimes think that it's character for someone else. It's not my character anymore. That's the part
yeah,
that like I
yeah,
don't
and that's a subjective reality. It
yeah.
doesn't mean that what I'm saying is right.
But
It's
it's
just
ours, right?
my
It's
truth.
yeah, it's what we share. It's what we kind of see. It's not what we grew up in. And like if you went back now, you'd see in our time there'd be people playing road hockey.
Yep.
There's no road hockey anymore, right? Like nobody
No.
plays road hockey.
No.
So all of those things just kind of aren't there, and those are some of the fond memories we had. Like we didn't care about what a house cost when we grew up there. Like
Yeah.
we're kids, right?
Yeah.
So it didn't really matter. Listen, what I want, I haven't asked you yet, but do you have any showings going on
Um. Right now,
or future ones?
no. No solo shows right at the moment. Uh. But I'll if there's conversation around that, I'll certainly post it. Um.
So we'll post
Yeah.
up. We'll post. You can, if you want to look at Kirk's or purchase some of Kirk's work. He's at kirksutherland.com. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
And we'll post that on the description like we did last time. And I was gonna say, if you come and take a look at what Kirk is doing, like I'd be surprised if you wouldn't be incredibly attracted to how he mixes the colors and brings them up because they almost speak words, Kirk. Like that's to me how I would describe it in some ways. So, your work is right now? Is it in any galleries? Do you know of?
Yeah. No. I show internationally.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And that would
So
all be
yeah.
on your website too, right?
Yeah, so I do have art dealers and art consultants and whatever else, but I do actually have archives, not here in my studio, but I have archives in a in a in a an undisclosed area, I guess you could say. You know, yeah, a safe place. Yeah, a guarded area. Feel like Fort Knox. Yeah, and I do sell out of my archives as well.
Oh,
So
cool. Is
yeah,
most of that posted on your website? Because I know you have gallery
uh,
on your website.
yeah, through the gallery page, you can purchase directly through
Okay,
the
cool.
yeah. But I'll be honest with you, most of the collectors, I all the way all down 33 plus years, I know very few individuals who actually purchase my work because it's through art dealers and
Right,
art
right. Like yeah,
consultants
for
and
sure.
you know uh, gallery directors and curators and whatnot. So yeah, they don't reveal much information. There's the there's the odd one that's it's pretty obvious. I can't even mention this one. Recently, I posted that I have a painting um, that was purchased by a collector, but I had to take it down because of the nature of the um, let's just say the corporation.
Oh, really?
So
Oh, okay.
yeah, yeah, they it had to do with um, uh, investments. I
Oh,
guess the
okay.
best way of
Okay.
putting it. I'm
Yeah.
trying my best not to say much, but yeah.
That's fair. That's fair.
No, they were wonderful. They're great. No, you know what? I have to say that I have gratitude for everything that's been given to me, and gratitude to them as well. So it was nothing, just to keep the post and just take that down because they didn't want anything highlighted.
Sure.
It's a very um, let's just say it's not the kind of place that would be publicly accessible,
Right.
you know. And they were
Well,
collectors, so
I was
yeah.
going to say, I hope that your success continues. I think it's so cool that you're being able to put this together. I'm really pleased to have this conversation. I hope we have another one because it just we go in so many different places, and I really do think it helps not only to bring your art to attention, but also to bring art to people that don't necessarily gravitate to that world, and what goes on in there, because there's so many different things that you pulled from, and some of the arts between Monet and Hoffman today. It's neat learning for me, learning some of the different artists that you've been influenced by, but also have been mentored by.
Right, right. Well, no, it's been great talking to you too, Doug. Always.
Is there
Yeah.
anything that we haven't gone through today that you'd like to kind of say before we go?
Uh, let's see. Hmm. Hmm. But I mentioned experiences. Uh, I just truly believe that everything happens for a reason. That there's
Interesting.
purpose behind everything, and everything needs to happen um, in order to uh, get to where we're supposed to go, even if it hurts a lot,
Yes.
even if you know. I haven't had the greatest success in romantic relationships, and I know why. I know why because through each relationship, I was gaining a greater understanding of confronting the challenge that I needed to deal with and finally confront. And my
Interesting.
last relationship, actually, finally, I was able to look at it crystal clear and say,
I,
okay, now I got it. Because, I mean, none of us get out of childhood completely intact. None of us, you know what I mean?
there's some truth.
Yeah, none of us, we're fragile creatures and
Yeah.
whatever else. So, and a lot of us keep attracting the same individuals or getting involved in the same situation and whatever else.
Yep.
But when you realize it, all of a sudden, the realization and all of a sudden the acknowledgement and the understanding of it, it changes your frequency. That's what I've realized in this world. That I
Interesting.
was running on a frequency, let's just say it was a sludgy one, it was over here. And given the fact that these experiences happened, I could now actually not only pinpoint it, I could actually, with mindfulness, stare at it like it was an object. And I could look at it without emotion and say, that's where you were. Yeah. I'm actually not even there anymore. You notice I'm separated from you now. You're floating over here. So if I'm in this other place, then well, I'm in a different position in the universe. I have a different frequency than you. Is there any wonder why I went through this? So I kind of thank all of those individuals.
Yes.
As miserable as wonderful as some things were, and as miserable endings can be, and whatever else, I thank those individuals because they were they were they were aiding me and helping me to confront the challenges that I needed to confront that I've probably been holding on to for lifetimes.
Wow.
Yeah,
That
yeah. Because
that's
I believe we come in this life with baggage, even, you know. And if you can find out what the baggage is, uh, here lies, the challenge that we need to confront. I needed to confront, and I think we come here to confront negativity, and we can and flipping those particles to positive. You know what? They're not. It's done. It's done. You've so
there's a lot there.
call it education, call it learning, call it a lot of things, but um, gaining a true understanding. And then there's no anger anymore. There isn't any anger. You're not harboring anything. You just think you're saying, it was necessary for you to be this way so that I'm in this position now.
And you and you
You
and
know,
you and you continue to grow, and to me
yeah,
that's what life is all about. I mean, in a way, that's kind of how I even titled this podcast, Better Than Not. Like all of that was better than not doing it, right? Like the great Shakespeare said, it's better to love and lost than never to have loved at all. And that
Exactly.
it comes back to what you said about the experience. You can't drive without and know what to drive, how driving
Mhm.
is all about without driving. You can read about it all you want, but you can't do that. And I think
Right.
that's a great way to kind of summarize what we've talked about today. How cool.
Exactly, exactly. And as I said, this whole place that we're in right now, it's an honor system. We can pick and choose. We can take somebody's. Often we do. Someone will say something, and they're probably saying it, and they're probably feeling it genuinely, but we are perceiving it just the way we're going to perceive it.
Yes.
And that's where the problems come into place. That we have to realize that you'll always have a different POV than me. So I'll realize that, not quite a mountain lion, not quite a,
As you said.
plankton,
As you said.
but,
Yes.
you know,
Yep.
but there is going to be between people, there are canyons and
Oh,
there are, that's a reality and it's not a bad thing
it's
given
a
the fact
reality.
that I'm an introvert. I'm a reformed empath. So it's say reformed because it's I've looked at my empathy and I've really worked on that. So yeah,
We're
it's
works in progress.
yeah, you can't. I mean, yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's a good thing, but it's just a fascinating world in the end. I mean, it
Is
really is. It's a
that
fascinating world,
that
and a
we
lot of
get
times you just got to sit back and laugh at it.
and
You really do.
we get this gift to experience it for a time. So
Yes,
very cool.
yeah, yeah. It's amazing when you're immersed in it.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, it's okay. Yeah, we experiencing it. We experience it, and it's all good. And
I
we'll
like
always
I,
be able to keep that experience.
I like what you just said. It's okay. That's good.
It's okay.
That's good. Well, with
Yeah.
that, Kirk, I you are going to get another invite back, that's for sure, because I love having
Oh,
this
great. No, like
conversation.
that. I love these. These are awesome.
If
You
you
know.
again, you'll see it on the description for this, but if you want to reach out to Kirk and his work, he's at www.kirksutherland.com, and I do recommend you take a look at some of the work. You can find him on Facebook too. um are you on other social media, Kirk? You're in
Instagram.
Instagram.
Yeah, I've got my fan page on Facebook, which when I first went on, I felt very narcissistic. I went right against my grain.
We all do.
Being an artist, you don't want to sell out. You want to look like you have integrity and all this. In reality, there's no difference between that and being on a gallery wall if
Yeah.
you do it upright.
I
It's
would
there's no
never,
difference.
I would have never seen you without that.
Right. I
So
mean,
that's
paintings
plus.
are not that great in closets. You know. You know.
Yeah, they
They're
are to
meant
be
to be
seen.
out. They're meant to be out and meant to be experienced. It's
Right
like
on.
that wonderful song that you wrote. Why isn't it out there so people can hear it?
Right
Or
on.
whatever literature book, whatever it could be. It's important. It really is, and it can, in its own weird, strange way, it can, in increments, it can change the world. Right?
We need each other and that changes the world for sure.
Yeah.
But with that, I'm going to thank you again, Kirk. I thank you for watching or listening, however you pull in your podcasts. Thanks for tuning into Better Than Not. Hope you like this episode and hope you tune in again. For that, it's bye for now.
Thanks, Doug. Thank you.
Are we on? Good.
Welcome to the Better Than Not podcast. Sometimes we get it right, sometimes we don't. But when we at least do something, we know it's almost always better than not.